Um, okay, let's get into it. Um, boop, 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 boop. I'm flattered. Okay, so e4 is played in this situation, e5, and notice we are just protecting the center that is being contested, and we're waiting to see what opening our opponent plays, which in this case, he goes for the Scotch. So the Scotch is what I would say a more risky opening. It's it opens up the center right away. You take back, and we'll see what he wants to do here. We'll either see the Scotch Gambit or okay. So he strays off a theory already. In this situation, bishop to c4 will be the Scotch Gambit, and that's a very tricky line after knight to f6, or knight just takes, and then bishop c5. That will be predicated around building pressure on d4. But in this case, tricky bishop f7. I would like to deliver a check here, but notice that that could be a little risky because our queen is under attack, and you have to defend the queen. I think bishop e7 is probably the best move. It's a direct attack on the bishop, which is only defended once, but technically attacked twice with a reinforced bishop. Um, and I would actually, hmm, I would actually like to note that in this situation, he hasn't actually taken the pawn back on d4. I wonder if simply just taking the bishop makes sense, or even just h6 and then develop the knight. Because I think right now we're actually gonna win this pawn, and then immediately want to develop the queen out because my next move I think will be either knight f6 or knight e7. Maybe h6 makes sense, and then after the knight comes back, then queen f6. But I also don't necessarily need to damage the structure, right? Because when I want a castle short, it's important to not make too many concessions with these pawns. They're for defense. So decision made. I believe queen f6. I mean, maybe even queen. Yeah, queen f6. Fine. Queen f6. We'll develop to an active square that protects the pawn even further, and then develop the knight to e7. And notice that in this way, my development is almost complete already, and I'm threatening the d5 push, which he does amply block. Bishop c4 is basically saying, okay, what are you going to do with your king? And I think I made it clear. I want a castle short. I want a castle short. I'm not too worried about this pressure here. And I don't know where his knight's developing. Notice that the pawn, which he has not taken yet, is already attacking that important c3 square for the knight, and the queen is blocking the knight as well. So a long castle actually will take an extra move unless you play knight a3, which to me a6 would immediately kind of ruin that idea. I mean, yes, then you have the long castle, but I already have a6 now. The knight's not going anywhere, and I'm threatening b5 push. So um, he's very clearly looking to push e5 here. And I have two options for defense. The first option is knight e5. The second option is maybe just h6. There's no dark square bishop to eventually sacrifice, which is you'd be very concerned about a dark square bishop here because it could really mess with the structure, especially if the queen gets like g3 or somewhere like that. And now in this situation, I like this push a lot. And notice that in this way, when the pawn pushes here, I have knight takes e5. And I'm threatening a bunch of different things, but mainly we win that pawn. And yeah, not opposed to just trading down the situation. And then one final move, I think, to really solidify my position would be c5, looking to build an extremely strong center in the middle of the board, and maybe bishop e5, supported by the knight, looking to attack the weakened square, but then knight a3 might be played anyway. To me, it makes sense to develop my last piece. Even though it's not the best spot, it immediately wins us another pawn. Notice that he completely ignored the threat and played a quick castle, and we're going to make him pay for that. Being down one pawn in this position is very difficult. Being down two pawns is nearly insurmountable. So we'll go ahead and take here. Notice that castling isn't even that great a move because the queens are off the board. I would suggest just developing normally. But yeah, and then developing normally and then keeping the king in the center. Okay, so what do I do here? What do I do here? All right, so bishop to g4, and he's got a. I mean, what does he really have with this? Not much. I could even play f5, and notice that in this way, we're attacking the bishop. Cry about later. I'll call him back after. Okay. And then c6. Okay. This knight is hanging. Rook e8 would be a massive mistake because the bishop can just come back, but then maybe g6 is playable here. And then that's not very bad at all. Maybe I will go for rook e8. I think he's going to go for bishop h5 and then immediately just pawn g6. I knew he would try for this. It's a good move. Like it looks really good on paper, right? But actually, it just gives me an extra development. And now king to f7 is played, and we're very happy with our position. Don't take back, but just keep pushing. And notice that this kingside push is now a serious idea. This kingside push is a serious idea. We'll continue with f4, right? Yeah, we'll continue with f4. All our pawns are on dark squares. Our bishop here is not that strong, but it does serve a purpose. It's not completely useless. And now we just have to figure out maybe a reroute for the knight. Either knight to c8 or knight to g8. I'm thinking c8 and immediately d6, but maybe g8 and then, yeah, this, that, and the other thing. We'll develop this way. And this does give him the opportunity to take and then get another rook ready to go in the action. But for me, I think that trading down is just losing. And I'm not too worried about this advancement of this pawn here on the a file either. If rook takes, just rook takes back. And notice that we're just up 3 pawns here. And our knight will get this really nice c4 square. And if he does choose to trade, it just won't work very well. Notice that we're not giving him anything. We're not looking to open up the a file. We're just looking to have complete control of this game in every facet. So what I like here is knight to c4, forking the knight and the rook, and basically soliciting the knight to take and then pawn takes. And in this way, yep, he does win this pawn here, sure. But notice the road is paved in gold because after rook to e1, nothing too fancy here, by the way, nothing too fancy at all. Push, and notice that d1 is completely under control, and the pawn will promote. Lots of distractions today so far. I've noticed, but still a pretty much perfect game in all regards. I would argue this is probably a high 90s accuracy performance. And this promotion is unstoppable. So this is a really good way just to go ahead and promote to win. That does nothing. We'll get the queen out. And then there's going to be a mating net. I'm assuming it will start with bishop to e4. And then something with the rooks and queens. So there'll be a mating net here. We're going to spend our last 4 minutes trying to find it. We don't want to just whittle down this position and play some boring endgame. I want to just outright win. So we'll see what he plays here, but notice there's just too much pressure on the first rank, and the light square bishop will come in to check. Maybe f2. It's also possible that he just makes us wait it out, but nope, he goes for something different. So this move doesn't really do much. For me, I would argue that bishop e. So look, this is actually a very constructive lesson here. Yes, the bishop is hanging, but I actually don't need the bishop. The bishop is blocking the rook from protecting the third rank. So actually bishop to e4, checking the king and discovering our own queen is the best move here. Discovering our own queen. And in this way, the king has maybe two squares, either king h2 or king h3. So king h2 is played, and simply just rook to h1, checkmate.